"Help me, my ex found me," lonely teacher whispered to mountain man. His response will shock you. Ever since she was a child, she had dreamed of standing in a classroom filled with curious young minds, helping them explore the world one lesson at a time. She loved seeing the spark in a student's eyes when they finally understood something difficult, the quiet moments when a shy child would raise their hand with pride, and even the chaos that came with organizing projects, school events, and classroom activities. Teaching had always been her passion, but recently, life had felt heavier than ever. After ending a long and painful relationship, Clara needed a fresh start. She wanted to leave behind the noise and rush of city life, the constant reminders of her ex everywhere she turned. The apartment she had shared with him was now just an empty memory, and the streets she had walked daily seemed too narrow, too confining. Everything in her old life carried shadows of the past, memories she couldn't shake, pictures she couldn't bear to look at, and a lingering feeling that someone was always watching. It wasn't just the memories that haunted her, it was the fear that he could find her wherever she went. So, Clara made a bold decision. She found a small, cozy town nestled in the mountains. It was the kind of place where mornings were quiet, birds filled the air with song, and mist rolled down the valleys like soft clouds. The town was far enough from the city that she could feel a sense of freedom again, yet small enough that she wouldn't be completely alone. She rented a little cabin on the edge of the woods, a place surrounded by tall pine trees and hidden trails. It was simple, but it was hers, and that mattered more than anything. Her days began to settle into a peaceful routine. She would wake up early, brewing a strong cup of coffee as sunlight streamed through the windows, casting long shadows on the wooden floor. She spent mornings grading papers and preparing lessons for her students, afternoons tending her small garden or walking through the forest trails, and evenings reading by the fireplace or listening to the wind whisper through the trees. For the first time in a long while, she felt the world slowing down. Life was quiet and she liked it, but even in this tranquility, Clara's past lingered. Sometimes, when she was walking along a trail or sitting on her porch, she would catch herself scanning the tree line, imagining someone hiding in the shadows. The fear was subtle at first, just a small shiver that ran down her spine. But over time, it grew stronger. Every unfamiliar sound, the snap of a twig, a rustle in the bushes, or a distant engine, made her heart race. She told herself she was being paranoid, that she was safe in a place where no one knew her, but a part of her could not let go of the fear entirely. One late afternoon, Clara decided to take a longer walk along a trail she had recently discovered. The path wound up the mountain, offering breathtaking views of the valley below. The sky was painted in warm shades of orange and pink as the sun began its slow descent. Birds chirped their evening songs, and the soft rustle of leaves in the breeze created a comforting background melody. It was beautiful, almost magical, but Clara's mind was elsewhere. As she walked, she couldn't shake the thought that someone might be following her. Her pace quickened slightly, though she tried not to make it obvious. She looked over her shoulder, scanning the trail behind her. There was nothing, just the trees, the fading light, and the shadows stretching across the path. Yet her stomach knotted, and her hands trembled slightly as she clutched her bag. She whispered to herself, a tiny voice lost in the vastness of the mountains, "Help me, my ex found me." The words felt strange even as she spoke them, a mixture of fear, desperation, and hope that anyone could hear her. Unbeknownst to Clara, someone had indeed heard her. From a distance, a figure moved quietly among the trees. He was tall and broad-shouldered, with the kind of presence that seemed to blend with the forest itself. Ethan, known by the few locals who had met him as the Mountain Man, had been tracking the movement of wildlife near the trail. He was familiar with the sounds of the forest, the subtle shifts in the air that signaled danger, and the unspoken signs of human distress. When he heard Clara's whispered plea, he froze for a moment, analyzing her tone and the fear in her voice. Ethan was not the kind of man to rush into a situation blindly. He moved with patience and caution, understanding that panic could make things worse. He observed her from a distance, noting her trembling hands, the quick glances over her shoulder, and the slight stumble in her step. There was something in her presence that told him she was in danger, something beyond ordinary fear. Without making a sound, he began moving toward her, using the cover of the trees and his deep knowledge of the terrain to approach safely. Clara continued down the trail, unaware of the man quietly following. Her mind raced with memories of her ex, the shouting matches, the manipulative words, the sudden bursts of anger that had made her life feel unsafe. She thought about how he had always found ways to track her, whether through mutual friends, social media, or his uncanny sense of where she might be. The fear that he could appear at any moment was suffocating. She had hoped that moving to the mountains, away from everything familiar, would finally bring her peace. But tonight, alone on this trail, the old fear returned with a vengeance. Suddenly, she heard a twig snap behind her. Her heart leaped into her throat and she spun around, eyes wide with panic. There was nothing, just the tall trees swaying in the wind. She took a deep breath, trying to calm herself, but the trembling didn't stop. She whispered again, almost to herself, "Please, someone help me." Her voice was barely audible, carried away by the cool mountain breeze. Then a calm voice responded, "You're safe now. Stay behind me." Clara froze, her mind racing. The voice was gentle but firm, filled with a quiet authority that immediately made her feel a little safer. Slowly, she turned to see a man stepping from the shadows of the trees. He was tall, with rugged features, and there was an unusual steadiness in his gaze. He didn't speak loudly, didn't rush her, but simply waited, his presence a shield against the fears that had been consuming her. Clara's first instinct was to flee, but her legs felt rooted to the spot. There was something in the way he stood, calm, deliberate, and protective, that made her believe, if only for a moment, that she might actually be safe. She nodded slightly, not trusting herself to speak, and fell in step behind him as he guided her back toward the safer parts of the trail. As they walked, she couldn't help but steal glances at him. There was no arrogance in his stance, no unnecessary bravado, just a quiet confidence that seemed to come from years of living close to the land and understanding its dangers. He didn't ask questions, didn't rush her story. He simply moved, aware of her fear and ready to respond to any threat. For the first time in months, Clara felt a flicker of hope, a tiny, fragile spark that maybe she wasn't as alone as she had thought. By the time they reached the edge of the trail, where the forest opened up and the lights of her cabin twinkled in the distance, Clara felt her tension slowly ease. She didn't know this man's name, didn't understand why he had appeared when she needed help most, but she knew one thing. Tonight, she had found a protector in the most unexpected place. And as she whispered a silent thank you to the mountains, to fate, and to the stranger who had heard her plea, she felt a cautious optimism return to her heart, a belief that perhaps, even in the shadow of her past, there could be safety, there could be kindness, and there could be hope. Clara could still feel the pounding of her heart as she followed Ethan through the winding trail that led toward her cabin. Each step she took seemed heavier than the last, weighed down not just by fear, but by relief that someone had appeared when she needed help most. Her mind raced with questions about this mysterious mountain man. How had he known she was in danger? Why had he come to her aid without asking for anything in return? Yet for now, she didn't have the courage to ask. She just clung to the faint sense of security he offered, letting him guide her through the dim light of the forest. Ethan moved with deliberate calm, his steps quiet but sure. He seemed to know the forest like the back of his hand, avoiding loose rocks and hidden roots, his eyes scanning every shadow. Clara noticed that he didn't just walk, he observed. Every sound, every movement, Every rustle of leaves was noted in his watchful gaze. It was as if the forest itself spoke to him, and he understood its language. She realized that this was not just a man who lived in the mountains, he belonged to them. As they walked, Clara's fear slowly began to mingle with curiosity. She wondered how he had come to live in such isolation. Did he choose this life, or had circumstances forced him into it? She wanted to speak, to break the silence, but the words stuck in her throat. Finally, gathering courage, she whispered, "Thank you for helping me." Ethan glanced at her but didn't stop walking. "You're welcome," he said quietly, "but you need to tell me what's going on. Why were you so afraid?" Clara hesitated. She didn't usually talk about her ex to strangers. She had learned long ago that people didn't always understand. But there was something in Ethan's presence that made her feel she could trust him. She took a deep breath and began, her voice trembling slightly. "It's my ex, he's been following me. I thought I was safe here, but tonight I heard sounds. I thought he had found me." She swallowed hard, trying to steady her voice. "I didn't know what to do. I was scared, so scared." Ethan nodded slowly, as if absorbing every detail. His eyes narrowed slightly, scanning the forest around them once more, but his voice remained calm. "Do you know where he might be now?" Clara shook her head. I just saw a shadow earlier. I thought it was him. I couldn't see clearly. And then you appeared. I don't even know who you are, but I felt safe." Ethan's expression softened, though it didn't lose its intensity. "You made the right decision to stay low and keep moving. That's the best thing you could do if someone dangerous is nearby. We'll make sure you get back safely." For the first time that evening, Clara allowed herself to feel a glimmer of hope. She realized that she didn't have to face this alone, not tonight at least. The mountains were vast and isolating, but with Ethan's presence, they suddenly felt protective rather than threatening. She stole another glance at him. There was a quiet strength about him, a sense of calm authority that made her believe he could handle anything the night might bring. As they neared the clearing that led to her cabin, Clara noticed something unsettling. A car was parked along the trailhead, its headlights off, almost hidden in the shadows. Her stomach knotted. That was impossible. She hadn't seen anyone leave a car nearby, and the trailhead was usually empty at this hour. Fear surged through her again. She looked at Ethan, her voice barely above a whisper. That car, could it be him?" Ethan didn't answer immediately. Instead, he scanned the area, his posture tense but controlled. "Stay calm," he said finally. "We'll assess the situation, don't panic. I'll check it out first. You stay here behind me." Clara nodded, her hands trembling. She could hardly believe what was happening. The fear she had carried from the city, the anxiety that had haunted her even in the quiet mountain town, had returned with full force. She wanted to run, to hide in her cabin and lock every door, but she also knew that running blindly could make things worse. She had to trust him. She had no choice. Ethan moved silently toward the car, each step measured, controlled. Clara's breath caught in her throat as she watched him vanish among the trees. The minutes stretched endlessly as she waited, listening to the faint rustle of leaves and the distant chirp of an evening bird. She clutched her bag tightly, her knuckles white, and whispered another silent plea to the universe for protection. After what felt like an eternity, Ethan returned. His expression was calm, but his eyes were sharp. He approached her slowly, signaling her to stay close. "It's empty," he said. "No one inside, no signs of anyone waiting to follow you." Clara exhaled shakily. Relief washed over her, but so did a lingering tension. I thought he was here. I could feel it. I was sure he was watching me." Ethan nodded again, understanding her fear without judgment. "Sometimes fear feels real even when the danger is. But we'll make sure you're safe tonight. I'll walk you all the way to your cabin." They continued toward her home, the forest around them growing darker as the sun disappeared behind the mountains. Clara's mind was a whirlwind of emotions: fear, relief, gratitude, and a growing curiosity about the man who had appeared like a guardian in her darkest moment. She wondered if she would ever see him again once this night ended. As they approached the clearing near her cabin, Clara felt a strange mixture of comfort and vulnerability. The little lights of her home seemed almost fragile against the vast darkness of the forest. She hesitated for a moment, glancing at Ethan. I don't know how to thank you," she said softly. Ethan's gaze met hers, steady and calm. "You don't need to thank me," he said. "Just stay aware. Keep to well-lit areas and don't go out alone at night if you can help it. And if you ever feel unsafe again, don't try to handle it by yourself. Ask for help." Clara nodded, understanding that his advice wasn't just practical, it was protective. She realized that she had spent too long feeling isolated, too long thinking she had to face her fears alone. For the first time in a long while, she felt that she didn't have to. She could accept help without feeling weak. Before leaving, Ethan asked quietly, "Do you live alone?" Clara hesitated but nodded. "Yes. Since I moved here, it's just me." He studied her for a moment, then said, "Good. You'll need to stay vigilant, but that doesn't mean you have to live in fear. The mountains have their own rules, their own way of protecting those who respect them. Just remember to listen." There was an unspoken weight in his words, a kind of wisdom that Clara couldn't fully understand but felt deeply. She realized that the mountains were more than just a setting for her escape. They were a teacher, a protector, and perhaps, in some way, a guide. And Ethan, the mysterious mountain man, had become an extension of that protection. As she finally stepped inside her cabin, closing the door behind her, Clara's hands still shook, but her heart felt lighter. She poured herself a cup of tea, sitting by the window and gazing at the dark forest beyond. The shadows that had seemed so threatening before now felt different, less like enemies and more like mysteries waiting to be understood. That night Clara lay in bed, replaying every moment of her encounter with Ethan. She thought about the way he had moved, the way he had spoken, and the calm authority that had kept her safe. For the first time in months, she allowed herself to feel something she had almost forgotten: hope. She realized that even in the darkest moments, there were people who could appear unexpectedly to offer help, and sometimes help came in forms that were quiet, strong, and deeply reliable. And though she didn't yet know it, this encounter was only the beginning. Her life in the mountains, which had begun as a way to escape fear and loneliness, was about to change in ways she couldn't have imagined. Danger, yes, but also trust, resilience, and perhaps a friendship that would teach her that even in isolation, she didn't have to face the world alone. The next morning, Clara woke up to the soft light of the sun streaming through her cabin window. The air was crisp and fresh, carrying the faint scent of pine from the surrounding forest. Despite the beauty of the mountains, she couldn't shake the unease that had settled over her the night before. Her encounter with her ex, or at least the fear of him, had left a lingering tension in her chest. Even though Ethan had reassured her, part of her still felt vulnerable, alone in the wilderness. She moved quietly through her cabin, making tea and preparing a simple breakfast. Every sound, the creak of the wooden floor, the rustle of leaves outside, the distant call of a bird, made her alert. She kept glancing toward the trailhead, half expecting to see a shadowy figure lurking among the trees. She told herself it was unlikely anyone would be following her now, but the fear didn't fully leave. It had been with her too long to disappear in a single night. Ethan appeared not long after. Clara had left a note for him, hoping he might come by to check if she was safe. He arrived quietly, as if he had materialized from the forest itself. His presence, calm yet imposing, immediately put her at ease. "Good morning," he said simply, his eyes scanning the area as always. "Sleep well," Clara nodded, feeling both relieved and slightly embarrassed. "I slept a little. I kept thinking about last night." Ethan didn't press her for more. Instead, he gestured toward the trail. "We should go for a walk. I want to show you some ways to stay aware of your surroundings. The forest can be peaceful, but it can also hide danger." Clara hesitated. She wasn't sure she wanted to leave the safety of her cabin, but she trusted him. He had proven that he knew how to handle situations she couldn't. Slowly, she followed him along the familiar path, her senses alert to every sound. The mountains, which had seemed so welcoming, suddenly felt full of unseen possibilities, some beautiful, some dangerous. As they walked, Clara shared more about her past. She told him about the controlling relationship she had endured, how her ex would track her movements, manipulate her, and make her feel unsafe even in her own home. She spoke quietly, almost as if the mountains themselves were listening. Ethan didn't interrupt, simply listening, letting her speak at her own pace. His presence was steadying, as if he were a silent shield ready to protect her from any threat. When Clara finished, she fell silent, staring at the forest floor. "I don't know if he'll ever stop looking for me," she whispered. "No matter how far I go, he always seems to know where I am." Ethan nodded thoughtfully. "People like him feed on fear," he said quietly. "They thrive when they see you unsettled or afraid. But you're stronger than you realize, and tonight we'll take steps to make sure you feel safe in your own home." Clara looked at him, her eyes wide. "What do you mean?" He smiled faintly, though it wasn't a warm smile. It was calm, practical, and confident. "We'll prepare. I'll show you ways to secure your cabin, how to stay aware of your surroundings, and what to do if you ever feel someone is following you again. Knowledge is power. Fear grows when you feel powerless, but the moment you understand your situation and take action, it loses control over you." Clara listened intently, realizing that she had spent so long letting fear dictate her life. The idea that she could take back some control, that she could act rather than just react, filled her with cautious hope. Later that afternoon, Ethan helped Clara examine her property. He pointed out areas where someone could hide, shadows where movement could go unnoticed, and suggested small changes to improve her visibility. He showed her how to create safe zones inside the cabin, where she could retreat if she felt threatened. They even practiced simple strategies for alerting someone nearby if she ever needed help quickly. Each suggestion was practical and clear, designed to give her confidence without making her feel paranoid. As they worked together, Clara began to notice something about Ethan that she hadn't seen before. He was not just strong and knowledgeable. He was patient, calm under pressure, and observant in a way that made her feel reassured without fear. It was as if he could see the forest in layers, what was visible, what was hidden, and what could become dangerous. And now he was teaching her to see the world in the same way. The sun dipped lower in the sky as they finished their preparations. Clara's cabin looked almost the same as before, but she felt different inside. For the first time in years, she felt she had a plan, a way to protect herself if danger came. And she wasn't alone. Ethan had become a guide, a protector, and a calm presence in the storm of her anxiety. Just as they were about to head inside, a faint noise reached their ears, a soft crunching of gravel near the edge of the property. Clara froze, her heart racing. She glanced at Ethan, and he immediately went silent, his gaze sharp and alert. Slowly, he moved toward the sound, gesturing for her to stay back. Clara watched in tense silence as he disappeared behind a tree. A few moments later, he returned, his expression calm but serious. "It's probably just an animal," he said, though his eyes didn't leave the forest line. "But stay alert. Trust your instincts." Clara nodded, her body still trembling slightly. She realized that living in the mountains, while beautiful, required constant awareness. The forest was full of life, some harmless, some dangerous, but with knowledge and vigilance she could navigate it safely. And now she had Ethan to guide her. Over the next few days, Clara began to notice subtle changes in herself. She walked with more confidence along the trails, kept a sharper eye on her surroundings, and even practiced some of the techniques Ethan had taught her. The fear that had once dominated her thoughts began to recede slightly, replaced by a cautious sense of empowerment. She still worried about her ex, but she knew she now had tools to protect herself. One evening, as the sky turned shades of orange and purple, Clara and Ethan sat outside her cabin, sipping tea and listening to the sounds of the forest. It was peaceful, yet there was a tension beneath the calm, an awareness that danger could appear at any moment. Clara glanced at Ethan, grateful for his guidance and presence. She realized that he had taught her more than just survival skills. He had shown her how to reclaim her strength, how to face fear without letting it control her. Suddenly, a rustle from the edge of the clearing made them both tense. Clara's heart skipped a beat, but Ethan remained calm, moving slightly to position himself between her and the sound. A figure emerged from the trees, not a human this time, but a deer, its large eyes reflecting the fading light. Clara exhaled in relief, a small laugh escaping her lips. Ethan smiled faintly, a rare softness in his expression. "See," he said, "not every sound is danger, but your alertness saved you from jumping to conclusions too quickly. That's progress." Clara nodded, feeling a mixture of relief and pride. She realized that progress didn't mean eliminating fear. It meant learning to manage it, to respond wisely rather than react blindly. And with Ethan's guidance, she felt more capable than ever. As night fell, Clara returned to her cabin with a renewed sense of determination. She set small routines to keep herself safe, locking doors, keeping lights on, and staying aware of her surroundings. Each step, though simple, felt empowering. She realized that living in the mountains wasn't just about escaping her past. It was about learning to live fully, with awareness, courage, and resilience. That night, as she lay in bed listening to the whispering wind outside, Clara understood that the next challenge would come. She didn't know when or how, but she knew it would. And for the first time, she felt ready. Not because fear had disappeared, but because she had learned to face it with knowledge, preparation, and support. Ethan had shown her that strength didn't always come from fighting. It came from awareness, planning, and staying calm under pressure. And Clara realized that in the days ahead, she would need all of those qualities. The threat of her ex might return, but she would no longer be defenseless. She would meet it head-on, guided by the skills she had learned and the quiet strength of the man who had appeared when she needed help most. And so, as the moon rose high over the mountains, Clara drifted into a cautious sleep, aware that her journey of courage, survival, and self-discovery had only just begun. Days passed in the mountain town, each one blending the peace of nature with the tension that still lingered. In Clara's mind, she had grown more confident, following Ethan's advice and paying attention to the subtle signs of danger around her cabin. The forest no longer seemed completely intimidating. She could walk the trails with awareness rather than panic, but the shadow of her past never fully disappeared. The fear of her ex returning was always present, a quiet reminder that safety was never guaranteed. One late afternoon, as the sun dipped behind the mountains and the sky turned deep orange, Clara heard a sound that made her freeze. It was subtle at first, the crunch of gravel near the edge of her property. She paused mid-step, her heart hammering. The sound came again, louder this time, accompanied by a low voice calling her name. She knew immediately that it was him. Her ex had somehow found her, just as she had feared. Clara's mind raced. She had prepared for moments like this, yet nothing could erase the sudden surge of fear that gripped her. Her hands shook, and her breath came in short, rapid bursts. She could see the figure moving closer, stepping from the shadows of the trees. Her ex's presence, once familiar and threatening, now carried the weight of terror she had tried to leave behind. Then she felt a hand on her shoulder. Ethan had appeared silently behind her, his presence steady and calm. He didn't speak at first, but the firmness of his grip and the confident stance he took immediately gave her a sense of protection. She leaned slightly toward him, grateful for his quiet strength. The man approached, his face twisted with anger and disbelief. "Clara," he called, his voice both demanding and accusing. You can't hide from me. I need to talk to you. Clara's stomach knotted. She wanted to retreat, to run into the cabin, but Ethan's steady gaze stopped her. He didn't need to speak. His posture alone sent a clear message. She was not alone, and he would not let anyone harm her. Ethan took a step forward, positioning himself between Clara and the man. "You need to leave," he said, his voice calm but firm. "Now." Her ex laughed, a short, sharp sound filled with arrogance and disbelief. "Or what?" he challenged. "Who are you to tell me what to do?" Ethan didn't flinch. He didn't shout, didn't make threats. He simply stood tall, his eyes locking onto the man with an intensity that seemed to pierce through him. "Or the mountain decides for you," he said quietly, but there was an unshakable authority in his voice. It was a statement, not a threat, an undeniable certainty that this was his domain and that he would protect those within it. Clara watched in awe as her ex faltered, a flicker of uncertainty crossing his face. Ethan's presence, his calm confidence, seemed to have a power she had never imagined. It wasn't violence or aggression that made him formidable. It was the quiet authority, the unwavering knowledge that he could handle any situation. The man stepped back slightly, realizing he could not intimidate them. Clara felt a rush of relief, but also a strange mix of admiration and curiosity about Ethan. How could one person be so calm, so certain in the face of danger? She had spent years feeling powerless, fearing her ex's unpredictable actions, and now she understood that true strength wasn't about confrontation. It was about control, awareness, and confidence. Her ex hesitated, glancing between Clara and Ethan. "This isn't over," he muttered, his voice lower now, filled with frustration. "You can't keep running forever." "You don't get to decide where I go or who I am," Clara said, finding her voice for the first time. The fear was still there, but it had been replaced with a flicker of courage. "You've had your chance to control me. It's over." Ethan placed a hand lightly on her shoulder again, a silent reassurance. "Leave now," he said once more, his tone unyielding. "Before this becomes more serious than it needs to be." For a moment, there was a tense silence. The ex's eyes narrowed, and Clara thought he might argue further. But then, slowly, he turned and walked back toward the shadows of the forest, muttering under his breath. The threat for now had passed. Clara exhaled, feeling her chest finally begin to unclench. She turned to Ethan, who still stood beside her, his calm presence radiating a quiet strength. She realized in that moment that his response had been more than protective. It had been transformative. He hadn't yelled, he hadn't fought. He had simply shown authority, confidence, and awareness, qualities that had disarmed her ex more effectively than any physical action could have. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. I don't know what I would have done without you." Ethan nodded slightly, but his expression remained composed. "You did well," he said. "You stayed calm, stayed with me, and followed the plan. That made all the difference." Clara realized that he was right. Her fear had almost taken over, but she had managed to control it, to rely on his guidance, and to take action rather than panic. It was a small victory, but an important one. After her ex had disappeared into the forest, Ethan guided Clara back toward the safety of her cabin. She moved more steadily now, her mind slowly processing the events of the evening. The adrenaline that had once left her feeling paralyzed was replaced by a cautious sense of empowerment. She knew that danger could return, but she also understood that she was no longer helpless. Inside the cabin, they secured the doors and windows together, reinforcing the small measures they had already put in place. Ethan showed her how to set up a simple alert system using everyday items, ways to signal for help quickly, without relying on technology that could fail. Each step was practical, clear, and designed to give her confidence. As they worked, Clara began to notice something else about Ethan. He wasn't just strong or skilled, he was patient, thoughtful, and careful. He respected her space and her pace, guiding her without forcing her to do anything she wasn't ready for. It was a kind of quiet mentorship, teaching her not just how to survive, but how to reclaim her life from fear. By the time they finished, the night had grown deep, and the forest outside was quiet once more. Clara sat down, exhausted but relieved, feeling the weight of the evening slowly lift from her shoulders. She realized that she had learned something invaluable. True protection didn't always come from confrontation or aggression. Sometimes it came from calm authority, careful planning, and a steady presence that inspired confidence. Ethan sat across from her, the firelight casting soft shadows on his face. He didn't speak immediately, letting the silence settle around them. Finally, he said, "You'll need to stay vigilant, but don't let fear control you. You've already proven that you can face danger without giving in to panic. That's the most important skill you can have." Clara nodded, understanding the depth of his words. She had spent so much of her life feeling powerless, constantly worrying about what might happen. Now she saw that power didn't come from avoiding danger. It came from facing it with awareness, preparation, and the right support. For the first time in months, she felt a sense of relief that wasn't tainted by lingering fear. Her ex had come close, had threatened her peace, but she had faced the situation. And with Ethan by her side, she knew she could handle whatever came next. That night, as she lay in bed, Clara reflected on the events of the evening. She realized that this experience had changed her, not just in terms of her safety, but in how she viewed herself and the world around her. Fear would always exist, but it no longer had to control her life. She had the knowledge, the skills, and the support to face it head-on. And she knew one thing for certain. Ethan's response had been shocking, yes, but it had also been a revelation. Protection wasn't about anger or aggression. It was about calm authority, unwavering confidence, and the ability to inspire courage in others. He had shown her that strength could be quiet, steady, and deeply effective. As the mountains stood silent outside her window, Clara felt a renewed sense of hope. Her ex had returned, but he had not won. She had faced her fear, and with Ethan's guidance, she had discovered a resilience she hadn't known she possessed. The night had tested her, but it had also taught her that true strength came from within, and sometimes it came from those willing to stand beside you when danger approached. And so, as the moon cast a silver glow over the forest, Clara drifted into sleep, feeling safe, empowered, and ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, knowing that she had discovered not just protection, but courage. The days after the confrontation passed slowly, yet with a sense of calm that Clara had not felt in years. The mountains remained quiet, the forest still, and the air carried the scent of pine and earth, untouched by the chaos of the past. For the first time since she had moved to this secluded town, Clara felt that she could breathe freely. Her ex had disappeared into the shadows, and though she knew he could still pose a threat, she no longer felt powerless. She had learned that courage wasn't the absence of fear, it was the ability to act despite it. Clara spent her mornings teaching at the local school, her afternoons tending her garden or walking the forest trails, and her evenings reviewing lessons or simply sitting by the window, watching the mountains glow under the soft light of the setting sun. Each day felt like a small victory over the anxiety that had once consumed her. She found herself smiling more easily, laughing quietly at the antics of her students, and appreciating the simple beauty of her surroundings. The forest, which had once seemed full of shadows and hidden dangers, now felt like a living, breathing companion, teaching her patience, awareness, and strength. Ethan remained a quiet presence in her life. He visited occasionally, always arriving without warning, his movements blending seamlessly with the natural rhythm of the mountains. Clara had come to trust him deeply, not just because of his skills or knowledge, but because of the calm, steady way he carried himself. There was no arrogance in his actions, no need to dominate or impress. He simply existed, fully aware of his surroundings and ready to act if necessary. And somehow, That quiet confidence was contagious. One afternoon, as they walked along a trail that overlooked the valley, Clara reflected on the past few weeks. She realized how much she had grown, not just in her ability to handle fear, but in understanding herself. She had learned to recognize her limits, to trust her instincts, and to accept help without feeling ashamed. And she had discovered that true safety was not just about physical security. It was about mental clarity, awareness, and the courage to stand firm even when uncertainty loomed. "You've changed," Ethan said quietly, breaking the silence. His eyes scanned the horizon, calm and unhurried. "You're stronger now. You see the world differently than you did a month ago." Clara looked at him, surprised. I think I am. I never realized how much fear controlled me. Now I feel capable, not invincible, but capable." Ethan nodded. "That's exactly it. Being capable doesn't mean you never feel fear. It means you know what to do when fear comes. You've learned to act wisely, to plan, and to protect yourself. That is real strength." Clara felt a warmth in her chest at his words. It wasn't pride in the usual sense. It was a quiet acknowledgement that she had grown in ways that mattered most. She was no longer the woman who trembled at shadows, who felt hunted even in her own home. She had faced danger, relied on guidance when needed, and reclaimed her confidence. And perhaps most importantly, she had learned that she could trust herself to respond, not just react. The following days brought small joys and discoveries. Clara began exploring new trails, finding hidden waterfalls and secluded clearings where sunlight danced through the trees. She experimented with cooking, using fresh herbs from her garden, and discovered the pleasure of simple meals made with care. She spent time with her students, sharing stories of resilience and courage in gentle, relatable ways. Each day, she felt more connected to the life she had chosen, the mountains, and even to the part of herself that had been buried under fear for so long. One evening, as she sat outside her cabin watching the stars appear in the clear night sky, Clara realized how much she had come to rely on the mountains and the quiet wisdom of Ethan's guidance. She thought about the confrontation with her ex, how terrifying it had been, and how differently it had ended than she had feared. She understood that the lesson had not been just about fear or protection. It had been about trust, clarity, and inner strength. Ethan appeared silently beside her, as he often did, holding 2 mugs of steaming tea. He handed her one without a word, and they sat together in companionable silence, listening to the whisper of the wind through the trees. Clara took a slow sip, feeling the warmth spread through her body, and realized that peace wasn't something that came from distance or isolation. It came from preparedness, courage, and having someone beside you when needed. "You've done well," Ethan said finally, his voice calm but carrying a weight of sincerity. "You handled fear, danger, and uncertainty. You didn't just survive, you grew stronger." Clara smiled faintly, her eyes reflecting the stars above. "I couldn't have done it without your help," she admitted. You showed me a different way to see the world, not just the dangers but the possibilities. The strength I have now, it feels real." Ethan nodded, a faint smile touching his lips. "That's the point. Strength isn't about fighting every battle alone. It's about learning, observing, and knowing when to act. You've discovered that for yourself." Over the next few weeks, Clara began to feel a lasting sense of freedom. She implemented routines that helped her feel secure, such as keeping her cabin well lit at night, checking the perimeter, and walking trails with awareness. She no longer felt trapped by fear. Even if her ex returned, which she hoped he wouldn't, she knew she had the skills and knowledge to protect herself and maintain control over her life. Her relationship with Ethan also evolved naturally. It was not built on romance, at least not immediately, but on trust, respect, and mutual understanding. He had shown her that help could come from unexpected places, and that strength could take many forms. Their connection was quiet but profound, a partnership of minds and presence rather than words or declarations. Clara found herself relying on his guidance, but also noticing how much she had internalized his lessons. She no longer needed constant reassurance. She was confident in her own ability to act wisely and calmly. One morning, Clara stood on her porch, watching the sun rise over the mountains. The sky was painted in shades of pink and gold, and the world seemed vast, alive, and full of possibilities. She thought about the fear that had once dominated her life, the shadows that had haunted her steps, and the man who had threatened her peace. And she realized that all of it, the fear, the danger, the lessons, and the guidance, had led her to this moment. She was no longer the same person who had whispered for help in the forest. She was stronger, aware, and ready to face whatever life might bring. Clara knew that her life in the mountains was not just an escape from the past, but a journey toward growth, courage, and self-reliance. She had learned that fear could be managed, danger could be anticipated, and support could be found in the most unexpected places. And she had discovered a quiet, unshakable truth. Even in isolation, she was never truly alone. As she sipped her morning tea, Ethan appeared once more, walking along the trail toward her cabin. He smiled faintly, a sign of the quiet approval she had come to respect. "Ready for the day?" he asked simply. Clara nodded, feeling a sense of calm that she had never known in her past life. "Yes," she said, "I think I'm ready for anything now." Ethan nodded again, and they set off together, walking through the forest trails. The mountains stretched endlessly before them, full of secrets, beauty, and challenges. Clara felt a sense of belonging she had never experienced before, not just in the mountains but within herself. She understood that life could be unpredictable, that fear could return, but she was no longer the same person who had trembled at shadows. She had learned to face the unknown with courage, patience, and clarity. By the time they returned to her cabin, the sun was high in the sky, casting warm light over the forest. Clara felt a sense of completion, a quiet acknowledgement that she had emerged from fear stronger, wiser, and more resilient. The mountains had tested her, danger had confronted her, and guidance had shown her the way. She had grown, and in that growth she had found freedom. As the day passed into evening, Clara sat once more on her porch, gazing at the horizon. She knew her life would continue to have challenges, but she was prepared to meet them. The lessons of courage, awareness, and trust would stay with her forever. And though she would never forget the fear of the past, she also knew that she had discovered the strength to overcome it. The mountains whispered softly around her, and she felt a deep sense of peace. Life had given her trials, yes, but it had also given her resilience, growth, and the quiet strength of companionship. Clara understood now that true safety and courage were not about never facing danger. They were about facing it, learning from it, and moving forward stronger than before. And with that understanding, Clara smiled softly, feeling the weight of fear lift from her shoulders. She was free, not just from the threats of her past, but from the chains of doubt and uncertainty that had once held her captive. The mountains, the forest, and the quiet wisdom of a man who had appeared when she needed help most had shown her the way. She was ready for life, for the future, and for whatever the world might bring. And this time, she knew she would face it with strength, courage, and the knowledge that she was never truly alone.